20. The city's largely Democratic group of representatives will return to the House, and the city's only congressional Republican, Nicole Malliotakis, is returning to her seat in the 11th Congressional District, which covers southern Brooklyn and Staten Island. She says it's clear that voters are dissatisfied with the current leadership in Washington.
Staten Island and southern Brooklyn is a little bit of an outlier in the city. I represent a lot of civil servants, hardworking, tax-paying people who just want common sense in government, and unfortunately they don't see it with the current administration we have in Washington, or the governor or the mayor.
That was at a victory party on Tuesday night. Congresswoman Malliotakis in studio with us this morning. Thank you for coming in.
Good morning.
A lot for Democrats to think about, a lot for Republicans to think about. What was your reaction? How confident were you going into this election?
Well, look, I know that my district feels that there is a need to have a bipartisan representation in Washington, and I'm the only member of the Republican majority, and I think that's going to be even more critical now, knowing that we will have a Republican in the White House and the Senate has flipped, and I believe that we will retain our majority in the House. To have one Republican at that table for our city is critical, but I also think the results that you saw throughout the city and throughout our state, where President Trump did extraordinarily well, much better than he did in the last two races, was because people are fed up with the one-party Democrat rule. They're tired of the mass illegal migration, the gangs that have foreign gangs that have taken over the streets of our city, and they want just common sense to be restored. They're not happy that the state and the city has used $5 billion to put individuals who are committing crimes in our city in luxury hotel rooms.
So it's got to feel less lonely in your position. I mean, yes, you're still the only House seat for New York City for the Republicans, but you know now that there were a lot more votes for Trump in the Bronx, a lot more votes for Trump in Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan, for that matter. What can you do to represent the views of those people?
Well, look, what I'll say is in Brooklyn, 4 years ago, I was the only representative that was a Republican from any level of government. Now there's 7 of us. We just flipped the state Senate seat in southern Brooklyn as well with Steve Chan. I think what you're seeing is this is a correction that's taking place across our city and state. People want to see more of a balance. They want to see an alternative viewpoint, and the Republicans have provided that. And so when it comes to issues of not wanting to pay a congestion tax to enter another borough in the city in which we live, when it comes to making sure we have border security, we have resources for our NYPD, I'm the only representative in Washington that has actually earmarked federal funding for our NYPD to get them new vehicles and equipment and gear. So I think that people just want to see a balance. We haven't had that in New York for a long time, and that's why you're seeing a lot of shift, particularly in my congressional district, where we're flipping so many of those local seats.
What do you think is going to happen on congestion pricing? Kathy Hochul clearly identified it as a political liability, at least in terms of suburban votes and votes of those who drive rather than take transit in New York City. Does she try to revive it in this 2-month window before Trump takes over?
Well, interesting. What's happened is they've admitted that it is a cash grab. It's all about the money. It really has nothing to do with congestion or reducing pollution. And what I'll say is Kathy Hochul, now that we will end this migrant crisis that they've spent $5 billion on, they can use that $5 billion to go fund the transit system. We don't need to hit taxpayers with an additional tax. The budget is as big, it's over $100 billion more today than it was when I entered, the New York State legislature. Let Kathy Hochul prioritize spending in our state and fund the transit system. That should be the #1 priority for New York and our government. Those are the things people actually pay taxes for, right? So stop trying to hit us with this additional fee that is unfair.
The first Trump administration was filled with chaos. There is a long list of deputies who campaigned against him. They left his administration saying that they couldn't work with him. Will it be more of the same this time?
I don't think so. I think, look, President Trump is someone who holds the people who work for him accountable, and that's what we want, right? We saw this disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan with the Biden-Harris administration, 13 American soldiers that were killed, and it was absolutely preventable if they just closed Bagram Air Base after we evacuated our citizens. No one was fired. President Trump is someone who will hold people accountable, and you get a better work product because of that. So I think that he will surround himself with good people, smart people,
he did that last
successful
time, and
people.
a lot of them left.
Some of them left and some of them stayed, but he was so productive. Look what he did. Across the board, tax cut for working families, for middle class. He doubled the child tax credit, doubled the standard deduction. He created 7 million new jobs. He lifted wages. He brought unemployment to a record low for African Americans, for Hispanics, for women in particular. And he was very successful. He secured the border. He was stemming the flow. And unfortunately, this administration came in and wiped a lot of that success out. He also brought us to energy dominance, where we were paying so little for gas, for food, and we can restore that energy dominance and production here domestically once again. And I have full faith that he will do that, and he will address those issues that people cared about, right? The mass illegal migration, the economy, ramping up domestic energy production, and that will help people with the pain that they're feeling every day at the stores.
You're not worried about the climate consequences of ramping up energy production and burning more fossil fuels?
Well, actually, they've closed Indian Power Point here in New York, which was 26% of New York City's domestic supply, New York City's supply. That was clean energy.
You think that was a mistake?
Now they're relying more on fossil fuels. So I think we have to have an all of the above energy policy. I'm all for clean energy, but it's got to be made here in the United States, not sending tax dollars to communist China.
If there is an instance on transit funding, for example, where the views of the Republican leaders are out of step with what would be best for New York City, how do you send that message? How do you push back as a representative of the biggest urban center in the country and not fall into line with a caucus that's largely dominated by rural areas?
Well, I'm certainly going to fight for my district and for my city, and I've done it before. I did it when I voted for the infrastructure funding that was critical for New York. We've seen a lot of investment now come to our community. That was not in lockstep with my party, but it was the right thing to do for New York and my community. We're seeing a lot of benefit, from resiliency projects to the ferry being modernized to the seawall being back on track, sewer infrastructure across our state. So I will do what is right for the people that I represent, the people that elected me. And I do believe that President Donald Trump will do the right thing for New York City, too. He loves this city. He helped build this city. And I believe at the end of the day, he will do what is right for our city, even though politically he doesn't get the support from our city.
Well, but he's gotten more support. Does he?
Yeah.
Does he feel better about New York City because more residents went his way?
Well, I think that he loves this city. He wants to see it saved from the one-party destruction that has been caused by our governor and quite frankly, the mayor as well. And he wants to see it be safe again. He wants to see our country be secure, and he wants to make sure that it's well run and managed. But it doesn't take away from the fact that the state needs to do its job and prioritize spending. $5 billion that they spent on this migrant crisis, that they never had to house these individuals, and they shouldn't have been releasing them back onto the streets when they committed crime to go back to the luxury hotel room that you and I as taxpayers are paying for. Use the money for the transit system. And there's so much money in the state budget. Like I said, it's $100 billion more today than it was 10 years ago. It's double the budget of the state of Florida. And yet they can't find money to fund our transit system. That's nonsense.
Congresswoman Malliotakis, thank you for coming in this morning.
Thank you.